to me that the Iranians have, made the Strait of Hormuz their ultimate trump card, and they've linked it to the totality of the obligations incurred by the Memorandum of Understanding. So, they're not going to allow the United States to pick and choose what parts of the MOU the United States wants to adhere to or disregard. As far as Iran seems to be concerned, if the United States violates one thing, everything's broken, and the Strait of Hormuz goes back to being shut down. So it's the ultimate card. So I don't see the United States having any flexibility down the road. Now, as we've seen in the past, when Donald Trump, first signed the MOU, he said, I had no choice but to sign it because Iran had oil. So how long does it take for us to, get our oil stocks back up to where this emotionally unstable man suddenly feels like, hey, I bought a little time. We can go in and play the game a little bit more. He can fool himself into, having some, interceptor production, get surged to the Middle East and say, we got enough now for a week or two of fighting. Maybe this time I can get the Iranians to break. Who knows? It's very unpredictable when it comes to Donald Trump. But I think the Iranians have made the case, and they've articulated this, that it's all or nothing. That it's the totality of the MOU or nothing, that the United States doesn't get to pick and choose what parts it's going to comply with and what parts it's going to disregard. So hopefully there are people who are advising Donald Trump. And again, it doesn't matter because the man is emotionally unstable, highly irrational, and he'll do whatever the hell he wants to do.
Yeah. In the MOU, there was no mention of Yemen or Palestine. And right now, Yemen is defining its policy, is reshaping the region based on their policy, their sort of leverage that they're experiencing right now. And today we had a new attack. One of the, their missile hit one of the Saudi tankers in the Red Sea. And they're trying to control the Red Sea. And I assume they're receiving intelligence. I don't know what is the communication, but they need intelligence coming out of somewhere to help them with the case of Bab al-Mandab. And they're doing this, it seems, effectively to put pressure on Saudi Arabia. Do you think that the blockade would force Saudi Arabia to change its more than a decade policy toward Yemen?
Yeah, I think so. It's a trump card. I mean, when Saudi Arabia diverts 70% of its oil production to Yanbu, and by going to Yanbu, you now have to either come out the Bab al-Mandeb or shoot up to the Suez Canal, which is, from a cost-effectiveness perspective, not cost-effective at all. Indeed, some of the larger tankers can't go through the Suez Canal. So it's a trump card that Ansarallah now has, and they're wielding it very effectively. And the beauty of it is, Iran can continue to, impact global energy markets by, just having Ansarallah shut down Bab al-Mandeb. Iran can say, it's not part of the MOU, not my business, and yet make it their business. So the Iranians are very, very clever in their negotiations. They linked Lebanon, but they didn't link Ansarallah. They didn't link Gaza, but they've linked Gaza. Remember, Gaza is linked constitutionally. The Palestinian cause is linked constitutionally. So, the Iranians have a far stronger hand than I think anybody in the West has comprehended. And one of the reasons why is that they understand the region far better than anybody in the West does. They understand the reality of Ansarallah. They also know the history. How many people know that southern Saudi Arabia is actually part of Yemen? Have people actually studied the history of that and understand that the Saudis stole it from Yemen, and they stole it from the Houthi, actually, from what the tribes that today constitute Ansarallah, and that there's a great deal of concern in Saudi Arabia that Ansarallah may want these lands back, and if this war goes existential, Ansarallah will probably take these lands back. So this is a far more complicated situation than people think. The notion that the United States can bomb Ansarallah into submission has been mooted by 12 years of defiance on the part of Ansarallah since 2014, when Saudi Arabia, fronting for the United States and its European partners, backed by the United Arab Emirates, began an incessant aerial campaign, designed to crush Ansarallah. And here we are, 12 years later, and Ansarallah is alive, well, and living. They haven't achieved any of their objectives. They being the Saudis. So the notion that we can bomb Ansarallah into submission is just it's contradicted by the facts.
Yeah, but you mentioned that Iran knows the region. We know that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, Bahrain, they're all in that region, located in that region. They have to understand it. Do you see that sort of understanding? What is their perception, in your opinion, as time goes by? Is that going to change? Are they going to change their policies toward Iran, toward Yemen, toward the West Asia, or they're going to double down on the way that they're seeing? Because the attack on Iraq, to be honest, it doesn't show that Saudi Arabia is totally understand the situation they're in my opinion. And we're going to see maybe tonight or tomorrow a new attack from Iraq on Saudi Arabia, on the oil facility in Saudi Arabia. That in my opinion, that's going to happen sooner or later. But the reason I'm asking this question, you as much as we talk about Iran, it doesn't that much. It's not all dependent on Iranian position. It depends on the policies in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, on all of these countries. A combination of ideas and mindset in that region.
Well, let's put it this way. Iran could suffer catastrophic harm to its energy production capacity and still survive as a nation state, inclusive of the current government, because it has institution of governance that are linked to a constitution that's linked to the people. The people are Iran. Now we look at the Gulf Arab states. They're a bunch of fat, obese, perfume princes and sheiks that got their job because the British appointed them, anointed them to be heads of former colonial territories. They're fake as hell. There's no linkage with the people. They aren't of the people. They're not voted in by the people. They can do whatever they want. And believe me, the level of corruption that's carried out by these, fake leaders is mind-boggling. If the people ever found out the truth about what their leaders do in their name, how they abuse the wealth of the nation for their own personal perversions, that would be the end of them. So these Gulf Arab states are being confronted by their future existential survival. They need to be able to produce energy to produce the wealth that underwrites their existence. Part of their existence is about bribing the people. They have so much oil wealth that they, either give away subsidies, they give away cars, whatever they do. It's a bribe to the people. But the vast majority of it goes to sustaining a lifestyle that is mind-boggling. And if they lose this access to these funds, first of all, the bribes go away. Because remember, the first thing they're going to cut is money to others, not to themselves. But then their ability to sustain their lifestyle goes away, and their ability to underwrite the costs of the security mechanisms that keep them in power, security mechanisms tied to the United States and others through various defense arrangements. These dissipate. They're already seeing their security relationship with the United States go away. And so they have to ask the question, who's going to underwrite us, who's going to take care of us, who's going to protect us, who's going to defend us? And the answer is right now, nobody. So they're on their own. And then, now they become really weak because all it takes is Iran to launch, or Ansarallah, or the popular militias in Iraq to launch some attacks that take out energy production, and, the money spigot gets turned off. And when that happens, these people will either flee for their lives or die, because there will be violent upheaval in the Middle East. We talk about the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring will finally flow where it needed to flow to these unelected, perfume princes of the Middle East. So I think they understand the predicament they're in right now. And, I think China will have a very big say in the future because China needs economic stability. And so I think China doesn't play morality games. It's like, who's in charge? You're in charge? Okay, we'll deal with you. But China's shown a proclivity already to negotiate rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Maybe they could do that again if given the chance. But China can't operate diplomatically in a region that's dominated by the Americans militarily. And so it will require the dismantlement of the American military presence, which is sort of the antithesis of the security arrangements needed by these, fake sheikdoms to keep their spoiled, royal families in power. It's a very dangerous time, very unstable time. But Iran holds all the keys. Iran can terminate the existence of every single Gulf Arab ruling class within a week. All they have to do is unleash their missiles. But, be careful what you wish for sometimes. The chaos and anarchy that would follow, may not be worth it. So, this is where the Chinese, I think, are playing a role saying, hey, we can do business with these Gulf Arab states. We've done business with them before. Let us tamper down the tensions. Let us open up the possibilities by continuing to do business with them. And I think Iran would be good with that. Iran, this isn't Iran of the 1980s. I don't think the desire to have the eastern Saudi provinces rise up or have Bahrain rise up. I don't think it's prominent today as it used to be. If this war continues, you might see some of the old hardliners come back into power and say, no, we need to do this. But right now, I think Iran would settle for stability. Because remember, Iran has made a pivot away from the West. And that means a pivot away from territories that are under the sway of the West, which includes the Gulf Arab states. All Iran needs from the Gulf Arab states is stability, peace. They don't need anything else. They don't need favors. They don't need this. Iran's already made links with its future, Russia, China, and the East. And that's the direction I think Iran will be going.
Do you think that there was a report on Reuters yesterday that it says that the United States recently they've been using HIMARS and ATACMS they were hitting the western part of Iran, next to the Iraqi border and that province. And it seems that Reuters in a recent report reported that the United States is running short of that missiles, ATACMS and PRSMs and precision missiles, and they're using the range of these missiles is 250 or 300 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. And this is one part if they try to go on offensive, Scott. The other part would be the fighter jets using, long-range missiles like, Tomahawk missiles and these sort of missiles that they can use far, away from the Iranian borders, because we haven't seen any sort of, invasion of the Iranian airspace during the recent attacks, the latest attacks. Let's assume that if Donald Trump, what is the option for Donald Trump if he's still considering a new round of war with Iran? Because today he said that he's going to escalate. He's going to hit them hard if they don't agree with what Donald Trump is asking for.
I mean, words don't kill people. Normally, they could lead to policies that kill people. But saying you're going to destroy Iran and destroying Iran are two totally different things. As you've pointed out, the weapons shortage that exists in the United States has led to different mechanisms of employing kinetic violence against Iran. We are running very short of long-range standoff weapons delivered by aircraft. And so what we've had to do with aircraft is we use what are called JDAMs, which are these the bombs with the satellite guidance packages on them that allow for gliding. So if you drop it at a fairly high altitude, the bomb can glide in over defined space and strike a target. You don't go very deep with this because you have to keep the airplane standing off from air defense. We use HIMARS, and which is the GLMRS munition. We use ATACMS. Then we use the precision strike munition. My understanding is that we're all but out of precision strike munitions. I think there are only 90 to begin with. We fired 80 as of last month, and there's 10 left. Can't do much with 10 weapons. ATACMS, we've basically run the supply dry. We have to strip ATACMS away from South Korea and from Europe, and as soon as we do that, then we lose whatever potential we had. We know there's not much potential because the Ukrainians use ATACMS and HIMARS against the Russians, and the Russians have figured out how to jam the GPS signal and how to spoof the inertial guidance and basically disrupt these attacks so that the percentage of success is actually very low. But Iran, may or may not have the spoofing capability. I don't know, what the battle damage is being done to Iran. My guess is probably Russia shared the ability to deal with HIMARS and ATACMS, and the Iranians are implementing those measures as well. But when we're using them because we don't have enough standoff weapons, we've depleted our Tomahawk stock. So we are bombing basically the western edge and southern edge of Iran with what we have, but we can't go deep. Iran has missiles that have greater range than our missiles, which means that Iran can operate from a strategic depth that we can't reach with the available weaponry, and they can punish, all of the Gulf Arab nations, and they can strike deeper into Jordan. So, what you've described is proof positive that we simply can't have a broader war against Iran, that we've maxed out on our combat potential. We lack the capacity to meaningfully project power in a sustainable fashion into the Iranian strategic depth. Meanwhile, Iran continues to be able to threaten the totality of the strategic depth of the United States and our allies in the region.
There are two important points for Donald Trump. One of them is the Strait of Hormuz being opened again, back to what it was before the war started, in terms of, being open up, all these vessels getting in and coming out. And the other point is the Iranian nuclear program. And considering the 2 points, it seems that Donald Trump right now is pushing for, or try to force Iranians to talk about nuclear program at this stage, which during the MOU, they were supposed to talk, the MOU would be the first step, the second step would be the Iranian nuclear program. And Donald Trump tried this time around, he tried to talk about the Iranian nuclear program. Iran said, no, we're not going to talk about it. And it's going to be later, after achieving, after the preconditions being achieved or being implemented. And what is, from the point of view of those people around Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself, what is that deal that would include, the Strait of Hormuz together with Iranian nuclear program? And how do you see the possibility of achieving any sort of nuclear deal between Iran and the United States, while we know how difficult it is for Donald Trump and his administration to remove the primary and secondary sanctions?
Well, you've described two problem sets. One is a domestic political problem for Donald Trump regarding sanctions and how to do it. The bottom line is, even though Congress, you can't remove sanctions, the president has a clause in every sanction bill that allows him to waive without going to Congress. He might have to send a report, but he doesn't need to seek permission. He can say, no, I'm not doing it. There's nothing Congress can do about it. So, the president does have that escape clause. The problem is we have a midterm election coming up, and, the president can't afford to have domestic political strife especially one that can be exploited so effectively, like the Iran issue. You know what I'm talking about. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that all you need is a Lord Loomer to say 50,000 Iranian protesters were killed, and then in the minds of a significant percentage of conservative Americans, that becomes the truth. And then that makes it difficult for the president to act politically, because then there will be opposition from Congress. So the president does have an uphill battle to fight there. As I've said before, there's a deal in the making. I mean, if I were the negotiator, I don't want to toot my own horn, but if I were the negotiator, we'd have a deal. There'd be no doubt in my mind we'd have a deal. I already outlined it before with you. The deal is, a deal between Iran and Oman on the Strait of Hormuz, where the United States leverages itself into the Omani portion. So whatever deal is bilateral, but it allows Trump to say, I've got a modicum of control over the Strait of Hormuz that didn't exist before. And the other one on the nuclear deal is for Iran to basically take the deal that was negotiated by Oman on February 27th and was ready to be signed when the United States bombed on February 28th, to go back to that deal. And the way you sell this is to say this is a better deal than the JCPOA that was signed by Barack Obama, and that gives Trump his political out. And with those two political outs, I think Donald Trump could withdraw and just deal with domestic political issues and leave the unraveling of the U.S. posture in the Middle East up to the next president. Because there's things you can do. First of all, we're not going to be able to automatically jump in and resume what we did in the past. We've suffered too much infrastructure damage. So, there's going to have to be contracts let. There's going to have to be contracts negotiated with host governments that may not be so thrilled about having us continue this relationship. There's monies that have to be allocated. And so there's a lot of things that can be done domestically, politically, where Trump doesn't have to say, I'm retreating from the Middle East. But the fact is, we are retreating from the Middle East, and then let the next administration unravel that, shift blame to them. These are kind of political maneuverings that are possible if Donald Trump was a rational actor. He's not. So we just don't know what's going to happen.